We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Weed Talk News. I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media.
And I'm Kurt Dalton, the founder of Cannabis.net.
And today we're going to start in the state of Nevada. Last week, you might remember that we were talking about Governor Steve Sisolak. He was ready to expunge the records of 15,000 prisoners in Nevada jails for cannabis possession crimes. Well, guess what? This week, he did it. And you have to congratulate Governor Steve Sisolak for expunging all these records. And we know one guy in particular who's very happy about what this governor did. Right, Kurt?
Yep, and that's Steve D'Angelo with his Last Prisoner project starting to take a real strong effect, especially on the West Coast. California has similar action going. Congratulations to Nevada. It's the right move. They've been ahead on the cannabis curve since day one, and it's all good news coming there.
Now, this makes the Last Prisoner project, like Kurt said, and Steve D'Angelo very happy. And in fact, their executive director, Mary Bailey, also commented that the Last Prisoner project is in the late stages of developing a robust re-entry program to build pathways to employment in that industry. So that's also good news because not only are they getting them out of jail, but they're going to give them an opportunity to work in cannabis and in the cannabis industry. I think that's what this is all about, Kurt.
Yeah, and it's really important because anyone knows that goes for a re-entry job, especially at what they're looking at, it's a background check. And if you have a criminal record or a felony offense, a lot of systems kick you right out. And I know there's federal legalization, bandbox that's trying to get people a second chance and get them in even with an offense like that. So let's kick it over to our Wall Street super reporter, Deb Borchardt, for our Weed Street Minute. And of course, what's a Weed Street Minute without some more High Times drama? Over to you, Deb.
Thanks, Kurt and Jimmy. Happy Juneteenth to all. Well, the earnings continued to roll in this week. M. Hardeen Group reported its 2019 results of $26 million for revenue. This fell from last year's $27 million. The company also reported a whopping net loss of $267 million for the year. Fire and Flower reported that its revenue for the first quarter, fiscal 2020, came in at $23 million. That was way better than last year's $9.5 million for the same time period. MedMen co-founder Adam Bierman stepped down from the company's board of directors. His co-founder Andrew Maudlin also stepped down as an observer of the board of directors. And finally, Black Tie CBD has filed a lawsuit against High Times for the cancellation of the Hemp Cup. Apparently, Black Tie paid $25,000 to be a sponsor and hasn't gotten its money back. And that's it for this week. I'm Deborah Borchardt from the Green Market Report for Weed Talk News.
One more business story, and this one's about Pixis International. They were the first big tobacco company to get involved in cannabis. And sure enough, because of COVID, they've had to file for federal bankruptcy. How does a big tobacco company that's an investor in cannabis actually file for bankruptcy, Kurt?
Yeah, they were a first mover, but as COVID affected a lot of businesses, unfortunately, that are closing, they were able to get their U.S. assets, the tobacco assets, in the bankruptcy courts, and they left out like the Prince Edward Island and the Canadian cannabis stuff. So this will probably just be a U.S. corporate tobacco type bankruptcy filing.
Okay, so now the next story is, anybody noticed how active former and current professional athletes have been during this Black Lives Matter protests and all the other things that have been going on? And certainly enough, once again, a professional athlete is stepping up and taking the lead on this. And this is Al Harrington, the former NBA player. And he has actually created a fund to help those in the illegal black market get into the legal market. In fact, his company Viola just closed on a $16 million round of investment to help those already existing brands in that illegal market transition over to the legal side. This is actually very impressive, Kurt.
It is, and Al Harrington's not just blowing smoke, if you know what I mean. We did our first story on Al probably 4 years ago at Cannabis.net. He has been in this. He has been a proponent of legalization, and now with the latest Black Lives Matter, he wants to create X amount of Black or African-American millionaires in the cannabis industry. So Al is 100% legit, a bedrock of the community in the cannabis space, and kudos for just really putting his money where his mouth is.
Absolutely. And now for the cannabis news out of our nation's capital, here's Phil Adams from the Vote Pro podcast.
Hi, this is Phil Adams from Vote Pro Podcast, here with this week's Weed Talk News DC report. The Library of Congress, as part of its Chronicling America project, is exhibiting a series of racist news articles from 1897 to 1915. Originally published as warnings to white America about the menace of marijuana, these articles are filled with stories of drug-fueled violence, promiscuity, and insanity that were used as anti-Mexican propaganda and helped drive the eventual criminalization of cannabis. Chronicling America is sponsored jointly by the National Endowment for the Humanities and the Library of Congress. Two members of Congress, Representative Earl Blumenauer of Oregon and Representative Barbara Lee of California, are circulating a letter urging fellow legislators to consider cannabis legal reform as part of the effort to promote racial justice. The letter states, quote, "We have seen for the last 50 years the cannabis prohibition used disproportionately against people of color, especially young Black men. In particular, the letter recommends passing the Marijuana Opportunity Reinvestment and Expungement Act, or MORE Act, which has cleared the House Judiciary Committee and now awaits a floor vote." The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has received hundreds of comments related to the use of medical marijuana for the treatment of pain. Seeking input from the public on preferred options for pain management, the CDC fielded comments from more than 200 patients who use cannabis for acute and chronic pain, many saying that cannabis not only relieves their pain, but also reduces or even eliminates their reliance on NSAIDs and opioids. The comment period ended at midnight on June 16th. That's Weed Talk News DC report for this week. I'm Phil Adams from Vote Pro Podcast.
Our next story has to do with Mad Money, Jim Cramer on CNBC. He interviewed the current CEO of Canopy Growth. His name is David Klein. And David Klein on that show predicted that legalization will be coming to the United States in the year 2022. Wishful thinking, Kurt?
Well, here we go. Bring out the dartboard, Jimmy, because now we're going to start playing the odds on a presidential election coming up and how that turns out. We're going to play the raffle board on a COVID spike, the severity of it in the fall. And then we're going to see how much money is left in the state coffers with tax revenue and what the jobs outlook look like. So I think David moved it up maybe a year. But again, with what's going on, your guess is as good as mine. We can make an argument it should be done immediately. But if David is sitting there and looking at the kind of the tides at a different level than we get to see, let's hope he's right.
All right. And again, one more note coming from the state of Louisiana. They have made an amendment to their medical marijuana laws. And now doctors in that state can actually encourage and not necessarily write prescriptions for medical marijuana patients, but they can now say, you know what, you should take a look at this for one of your ailments, and it may just help you. And that's actually a subtle but a big movement that doctors actually now can talk about, not necessarily prescribing medical marijuana, but using it.
And really, I'm more surprised about the state. When Louisiana starts expanding what they can do with medical marijuana, Louisiana, maybe this is what David Klein's looking at and watching the tide saying, boy, you get Alabama, Louisiana, who's left? Maybe we will see legalization finally across the board.
In the meantime, in the country just north of the border in Canada, they've got legalization going, and they are making a boatload of money on exports. Here's Solomon Israel from MJ Business Daily International.
I'm Solomon Israel from Marijuana Business Daily International, and this is the Weed Talk News Canadian Cannabis Report. Canadian cannabis oil was approved for export to 17 foreign countries in 2019, Marijuana Business Daily has learned. Australia was the top destination, followed by Germany and Denmark. All told, Canada exported more than 5,000 liters of cannabis oil products during the year. Hexo Corporation has sold off a greenhouse it acquired in 2019 as part of a $263 million deal to acquire New Strike brands. The greenhouse sold for about 10 million Canadian dollars. It's the latest greenhouse to be closed or sold off by major Canadian producers, including Canopy, Aurora, and Tilray. And Aurora President Steve Dobler is retiring at the end of this month. He was one of the co-founders of Aurora back in 2013, along with former CEO Terry Booth, who stepped down in February. Aurora is still looking for a new permanent CEO. That's it for this week's Weed Talk News Canadian Cannabis Report. I'm Solomon Israel from Marijuana.
Now that coronavirus has wiped out in-person conventions, MJ BizCon is putting on 2 online events from June 29th to July 1st, MJ BizCon Direct and the Hemp Industry Daily Conference Direct. Both events will feature industry speakers and exhibitors, and you will be able to communicate directly to them in this state-of-the-art online event. You can register today at mjbizconference.com. That's mjbizconference.com.
And of course, that MJ Biz Daily Conference is going to be online and should be a good one. In the meantime, the New Jersey legislature will be voting on the decriminalization of cannabis next week. That state has been trying to move towards legalization, but decriminalization is usually seen as the first step. Good news, Kurt, right?
Yeah, I know the governor really wanted to push harder for those tax revenues, but like you said, baby steps first. If it's decriminalization, it's better than nothing.
And now let's come back to Massachusetts, go up a little bit on the Atlantic seaboard and talk about the Massachusetts Cannabis Commission. You know, they have a budget of about $200,000 to create public service announcements that are designed to educate the public about how to use cannabis responsibly. And in this particular case, this PSA that they wanted to place on Facebook was about the dangers of making your own edibles and your own concentrates. Because, of course, if you're going to be using combustibles like a butane for that process, you could get yourself in big trouble. What did Facebook do? They took down that PSA. Kurt, you and I both know Facebook is not a friend to the cannabis businesses, are they?
Not at all, and welcome to the club. They do not distinguish between a government-sponsored PSA and sites like cannabis.net or other sites that are trying to put content up. And we've written endlessly about this where, listen, Jimmy, it all comes down to money. And we don't create any revenue because they can't take ads from the cannabis space on Facebook. We take up space in the user's profile where they can be showing ads that create money. So they have no need for us, and we're a pain in their butt. We're taking up space on their server with our videos. We don't create any revenue, and we're hogging up space. So they have zero interest right now until we start paying or allowed to pay by federal law at having our content there. So you'll be shadow banned. If you're not removed completely, as in your page and your post is gone, they'll do what's called a shadow ban, meaning they'll leave you up, but all of a sudden you'll notice your reach will be 1/10 of what it was. It won't go out to many people at all.
And they'll take down a couple of shows like we've done, have had to happen to us in the past. So anyway, that's the way it is in 2020 in the cannabis world. And I appreciate everybody watching another edition of We Talk News. I'm Jimmy Young from Pro Cannabis Media.
And I'm Kurt Dalton from Cannabis.net.
Remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.
We Talk Now, We Talk News, and In the Weeds are all available on most major podcast distributors like iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, and our friends at clnsmedia.com and our flagship, Cannabis.net. So subscribe, share, and like our videos on all the social media networks out there, including LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, the WeedTube, and YouTube. Weed Talk and In the Weeds are 2 productions of Pro Cannabis Media supported by Revolutionary Clinics, one of the top medical cannabis dispensaries in the Massachusetts area, now with 3 locations in Greater Boston, 2 in Cambridge and 1 on Broadway in Somerville. Rev Clinics has a patient-first mission. They will customize your needs as a medical patient with the proper titration and combination of strains, flavors, and products. Rev Clinics, where the patient comes first.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.